Okay, hello. I'm Denali Veda here with an amazing spiritual hero of mine, Peter Woodbury. He precedes himself. I'm going to let him introduce himself. I'll tell you a little bit about me first. I'm very excited to have this discussion and time with Peter today. So thank you, Peter. And I'm going to share screens.
Oh, you're welcome.
Where did that go? Okay, there we go. And so Denali Veda, as I said, I'm intuitive empath, and I call myself a light worker. Dolores Cannon would call us volunteers. An enlightened life coach, creator and founder of Denali Mind, Body, Soul. I've been an activist and researcher for almost 20 years. I practice introspective past life hypnosis, but I'm actually guided by the angels and do it a little bit differently than some of the others. I went through dark night of the soul or ego death majorly in 2015 when I had Lyme disease and I was bedridden. But the light brought me through, and through God's medicine, quantum healing, spiritual work, I was able to be healed. All healing comes from God, by the way, so it's what I definitely know and believe. I not only survived, but I was reborn, and I have been on a mission after my healing and my spiritual awakening to assist others like me, teaching and guiding others the way back to the light and how to heal their mind, body, and soul. And here's what a light worker is for people not familiar with that. The purpose of a light worker is to wake up the people that inhabit this beautiful planet and connect them with their true divine spirit. Our role is to teach oneness and close the separation gap that occurs when people forget that they are spiritual beings having a physical experience and not the other way around. And I'm going to stop sharing. And you're a light worker, of course, Peter, in Light Warrior. So go ahead and tell them if they don't know you. I don't know who doesn't know you by now, but what you're doing.
Well, sure. Well, I'm very affiliated with the Edgar Cayce organization, the A.R.E, and I'd say my work has moved into doing regression hypnosis, which has expanded, as you know, beyond just past lives. When people at this level of consciousness, they can access future projections, or they can access the deceased, or they can contact their guides, or have a number of different experiences. And so that's really been the focus of my work. I do, during this time where we're staying at home, it's been really a boon time for people working over Zoom and having these sessions. So yeah, that's what I do. Done, I don't know, I guess close to 6,000 of them. I teach regression hypnosis for the A.R.E. I teach, through my own, I teach out of my house sometimes, or I travel with it. So it's really that, I would say that's my work, is teaching people how to transcend ego consciousness and enter the soul aware level of awareness.
Beautiful. Yes. And what led you to this work? Like, do you have a story? What led you to
Sure.
Edgar Cayce and your quantum healing?
Yeah, it's Edgar Cayce says we pick our parents.
Mm-hmm.
Before we're born, we have pre-life planning, and so my parents were both psychiatrists. They were both Catholics, and they were both interested in metaphysics. And so I picked well, because I'm fascinated by the mind and psychology and spirituality, sometimes even religion, and of course the metaphysical, the unseen worlds. And so my great grandmother, who was 100 years old when I was born, and she lived to be 107, she was a medium. She could see discarnates. And so she sparked an interest, I believe, in the unseen. And so I just followed that up until I found Edgar Cayce. And then once I found Edgar Cayce, it just felt like coming home to me. And so I've been part of the A.R.E, the Cayce organization, going on about 20 years. And I've been teaching through that organization. Just like I say, for people, when I talk about Edgar Cayce, there's nothing really that new in what Edgar Cayce said. You probably heard it in other traditions, but what I find interesting in Edgar Cayce is that, to me, it was a place where it all comes together, where these different Eastern and Western traditions are brought into a completeness. And so that's what's drawn me to Edgar Cayce, the way that things are synthesized.
Yes, beautiful. And that's what we need, is a meeting of the East with the West, with
Mm-hmm.
bringing and I try to do that and teach that to people, that Hinduism, Buddhism, Christianity has more in common than people would realize. And it's really, I say my true religion is
Mm-hmm.
love. And that was what Jesus taught, was love, and Buddha taught.
Mm-hmm.
And love is the universal language and
Mm-hmm.
universal healer. So that's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
But okay, now what was I going to ask? What do you love most about what you do?
I guess I love most is that, people come in for sessions and they're so hungry, and sometimes they feel, I call it landlocked. They're depending on conversations with other people, and they're turning for answers outside of themselves. And what I really like is that if people give it a chance, they can access, the inner sacred and their guides or whatever, and get really significant information. And it's not even just information; it's an experience that I've been watching. It just seems it changes people's lives for the better. So that's what I get excited about. Just people, getting surprised and joyful that the soul level is available to them, and that it can really be helpful.
Yes, I think, I love working with the angels and spirit guides, and my favorite sessions are, probably the weirder sessions if aliens come through or going to other planets, or um,
Mm-hmm.
I've met a lot of famous dead people. I really don't get excited
Mm-hmm.
for living famous people, but I love talking to,
Mm-hmm.
the ones that have moved on, and it is very
Yeah,
interesting. But I also
that
do,
is interesting.
I love helping people. And of course, that's, I think the most benefit to me is helping people see that, our spirit guides are always there. God is always there. And it's not,
Yes.
you don't have to be someone special to, anyone can meditate. It just takes time. It's a
Mm-hmm.
practice. And what we do is
Mm-hmm.
help, we're guided meditate. It's a guided deep meditation is what quantum healers are doing essentially.
Mm-hmm.
And we're kind of turning people into Edgar Cayce. I should bring a book and have someone
Mm-hmm.
sleep on it, I think, and see
Yes.
if we get anything. My son did want to try that. He's, I'm going to sleep on a book. And I'm like, okay, go for it and see what
It
you.
is. It's true. I think it's finding, yeah, the inner Edgar Cayce, the inner Jesus, the inner Buddha. We don't have to find that outside of ourselves anymore.
Yes. And, one challenge I have is, strictly biblical, Christians that, and I was raised Catholic as well.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm in a family that doesn't accept yet what I do or doesn't understand it.
Mm-hmm.
And, so that's a big part of spiritual awakening, of other spiritual people I meet that are trying to learn more about metaphysics and about spirituality. And then there's this, propaganda out there that it's evil, it's witchcraft,
Mm-hmm.
and some people that are, even afraid, that meditation is evil, yoga is evil, they take it that far. Or,
Mm-hmm.
hypnosis is, something to be scared of too. So what do you do?
Mm-hmm.
Have you had any, of that in your life where you've met people like that are just, I don't believe
Well,
what you.
more earlier on, because now people know me, and they know about me. And plus, when you have such a big kind of a social media or internet presence, so people know that. So earlier on, I would get people that were more, didn't know what I did. But I remember what I really believe is that even in scripture, it says that anything put under God works for good. And so it's like, that's how I feel with this work. It's like, if you do it in an unspiritual way, it could be negative, but I do it all in a spiritual, prayerful way, and that's what I teach. And so you also, in scripture, Jesus said you judge a tree by its fruits. And so the fruits of this work have been really, really positive. It's not, people aren't becoming more egocentric, they aren't becoming destructive, they're actually having a closer relationship to God. So with those two things, it's got good fruit, and I put it under God. That's how I try to explain it to people. But I also, I'm well beyond trying to prove anything to anybody. I only want to work with people that are open and want to try this out. If I get grilled a lot by a lot of stuff, I say, well, maybe I'm not the person for you. So I'm not trying to convince anybody of anything. I mean, I think this time is important enough that that with the lifeboat, we just got to help the people that want to get on the lifeboat. We don't have to convince anybody who doesn't want to get on the lifeboat that it's time to get on. So
Yeah.
that's what I do. I just try to find the people that are open and willing and want to try this stuff out rather than ever trying to convince anybody.
Yes. I mean, it is in my dreams. They give me visions of, people that I know, and they'll tell me, you need to help this person. So I'll put myself out
Mhm.
there to them, but I'm not going to beg anyone, to help
Yeah.
heal them. So I do offer, and
Hmm.
I do, follow my guides, and some people aren't ready. A lot
Hmm.
of people aren't ready for the message yet. And
Yeah.
awakening, we're in the time of awakening. And so I see so many more people starting to wake up, starting to, to look
Hmm.
a little deeper. And, of course, that's because of Corona, and everything going on in the world is upside down right now. But there's a positive aspect of that because people are going within more, turning back to God more. So I love
Hmm.
that about it. And I think these times are exciting because I know what's coming, and so many positive things are in our future. Um,
Definitely.
I want to talk about, what how would you describe what quantum healing is? I describe it as, a spiritual healing of the mind, body, and soul. How would you describe it to someone that really doesn't know what quantum healing is?
Well, I know that quantum healing is the Dolores Cannon method,
Hmm.
and I'm not trained in her method.
Okay.
I think we try to do the same work with all the different methods that we work. I would say my method is more called soul contact.
Okay.
And so if I was to define soul contact, in scripture it says anytime you're absent from the body, you're present with God. And so I think with hypnosis, you try to get people less in the ego body consciousness. You try to bring them more into like a meditative state where you become aware of more than you than the physical body. But then you're also trying to maintain both states of consciousness so that the ego can gain the benefits of soul awakening. So that's really what I call it. It's just really, see, I think that our essential nature, when we were created, we came from the oneness, but part of creation was to give us an individual aspect of God. So we're like cells in the body of God with free will. And so we've been exploring and learning, but I think here on earth, because it's three-dimensional and the soul is infinite dimensional, I think we get trapped in the separateness aspect of our creation. And it takes a lot of work to go into the oneness aspect. That's where meditation and prayer, they bump us back up to that oneness. And so I think that the work that I do with soul contact or any kind of work with trance work that's spiritual, you're moving people beyond their just landlocked ego consciousness and bringing them into the infinite sense of themselves. And once you're in that infinite sense, it's just like all the scripture. What do you have to worry about? There's no time. All time is one. You're an infinite being, and so you start to download that sense of being eternal. And then aspects like fear and anxiety, those aspects sort of decrease somewhat the more time you awaken to yourself as an infinite being rather than a finite physical being. So that's a little bit about how I would define it. It's like a liberation experience.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Very liberating and also painful at times. Going through ego death is, so a lot of people come to me while they're going through their ego death, or they're stuck or became stagnant in their ego death. And I've gone through several, so I'd say maybe I'm an expert at that. No,
Yeah.
been an expert at suffering, but also I would, talk about how the ancients knew that sickness has a spiritual cause, and how important and how we've lost that in our modern society. And I, discovered why I had Lyme disease. Before I
Hmm.
understood, I believed in reincarnation, but I finally, after, a quantum session and meditation, was told, I was Peter in past life and I denied Christ. And that was part of my karma
Hmm.
in this life, was why I had
Hmm.
Lyme disease, or I was an
Hmm.
aspect of Peter. But so that really helped me through and understand, our understanding our karma, why we have it, and our lessons really help us awaken and stop being a victim, because none of us are victims. And that's a big problem with people that are, stuck in their ego death, or, just stuck in their problems in their 3D, thinking, when we need
Hmm.
to start rising above and realize, God doesn't really punish. It's all a balance of karma. And we
Mm-hmm.
agreed to all this is also what's, and that's a
Mm-hmm.
hard one for people to understand. You picked your parents and you had, horrible parents, or, all
Mm-hmm.
these, traumas that we might have been through, that we agreed to those. So that's a hard pill, I
Mm-hmm.
think, for people to swallow,
Mm-hmm.
but also important and helps them, go further in their journey.
Yes, definitely.
Um, Now, and then even um, the angels, people don't believe in angels anymore. And that's a big thing that, I call an Archangel Michael during my sessions to help,
Mm-hmm.
spirit attachments. And that's another cause of sickness that people are so unaware of, that we can have demons and lost souls that are causing pain in our body, that are cursing us, making us sick. And
Mm-hmm.
it is just, I had a session where a woman she was a man in a past life, and she murdered her wife, her pregnant wife. And that wife had been
Mm-hmm.
cursing her and had a knife in her back for
Mm-hmm.
generations, because she didn't forgive him
Mm-hmm.
and was following him. And finally her back pain went away because we talked to the wife and said, will you forgive and understand, and, crossed her over. And it's
Mm-hmm.
just, it sounds crazy. All these things would sound crazy to anyone else.
Yeah.
Definitely so many things that are unseen that, we need to start learning about and reawakening and going within also.
Mm-hmm.
Even if people can't get to a quantum healer or soul healer, or like ourselves, people can do inner work at home and start meditating at home. And there's so many free guided meditations on YouTube. Really, the
Mm-hmm.
source has put so much out there for people to, start
Mm-hmm.
doing their healing work just on their own. Um, so getting back to Edgar Cayce, how did he inspire you? And do you have a favorite quote or teaching from Edgar? Like, I particularly love his readings about the Essenes and
Mm-hmm.
his missing years. Those are some of my favorites.
Yeah. Oh yeah, those are really good. Well, it's like my whole childhood and adolescence, I was exploring different aspects of parapsychology and mediumship and aliens and all sorts of the metaphysical. But it was a little bit like there was something that wasn't complete in it. There was something like none of the people that I was really reading were compelling to me. I didn't really know exactly why. But when I read Edgar Cayce, what I realized is that he defines the psychic as of the soul. And so he puts all of this stuff as an inherent spiritual aspect. And I realized that's what resonates with me, is that psychic ability are just soul attributes, and that some of us have just gotten disconnected from our soul level of consciousness. And so he inspired me also because of his integrity as a person. Edgar Cayce, the man, had a deep integrity, and then he had a deep connection with Jesus, which I had also through my Catholic upbringing. So there was a lot of things that came together. Plus, I had also began to learn about Eastern religions and meditation, and there was so much in his readings that were broader than just Christianity. And, essentially, when asked, what's the best religion, his answer was, well, which one are you going to practice? And it
Mm-hmm.
wasn't really about there being a best religion. It was just about what religion, religions are all just ways to try to connect with God, which one resonates with you, and follow that one. So it's not like there's any kind of hierarchy of religion, which is what I had come to really believe. Um, so it was all those different aspects. I found that Edgar Cayce, the man, was a very integral person, and then that the source that came through him really seemed to be a representation of fairness and justice and equality, which I came to inherently believe were aspects of creation and the creator. So that inspired me. And then as far as what's my favorite aspect of his readings, I would have to say it's his spiritual readings. He gave readings on 10,000 different subjects, but it's really about how to, who we are, why we're here, the purpose and meaning of life. Basically the philosophy behind the readings that really resonates with me, and just basically about what we're trying to do as humans, as a soul in a physical body. How did we get here, and what's the way that we're trying to go back home? How how are we evolving, like you were saying, learning the lessons that maybe from past lives, things we didn't do spiritually, and so now we have a chance to address issues in our lives spiritually, and basically to return to the consciousness that we had. We're not even the same, but basically learn the lessons of Earth, and then we can go on to other dimensions and other schools of learning and evolution. So those are the man and his work that have resonated with me.
Yes, wonderful. I also enjoy the fairies, the lecture that I watched.
Hmm.
Oh, I can't think of his name.
Oh, with John Van Auken.
Yes, John
Yeah, I
Van
think
Auken.
he wrote a book about that. Yeah.
Yes, and then I have a fairy house in my backyard and talk to the fairies.
Oh,
um,
oh, nice.
but well, the future of healing, I feel like, is frequency and more spiritual healing, and more people are open to it now. You know,
Hmm.
part of my awakening was going to doctors constantly with autoimmune disease, and they have no answers and really not getting any better. And it wasn't till I worked on spiritual healing, holistic healing, where I finally was getting my health and livelihood back.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
I'll use during my sessions, 432 hertz, to get people raise their vibration. There's different frequencies for
Hmm.
healing. Now, do you use
Hmm.
any frequency in your sessions, or?
Well, what the work that I do is all just me and the person, either together in person or over Zoom. So
Mhm.
I'm not using anything other than the energies that they can create or they can access themselves. And so I think that sometimes they shift into different levels of consciousness and access different vibratory rates. But as far as me introducing anything, I haven't done that yet in my practice.
Okay. Well, very good. Maybe you're advanced. Maybe your vibration alone is probably enough to raise their vibration without,
Well,
without
thank you. I don't know about that.
any extra
Very
tools.
complimented.
Well, you're a master, so at what you do. So you're familiar with Dolores Cannon, though? See, I had thought you were practicing.
Yes, yes.
Okay. Well, her
Yes,
book, like,
Dolores.
oh, go ahead. Did you meet her, or did you?
No, I took the Brian Weiss training and I wanted to take her training, but she passed away just as I was, uh, scheduling to go to it. And so I was sorry never to meet her or to learn the QHHT method that she taught. But I've read several of her books, and she was the grandmother of past life regression. She started the whole
Mhm.
thing. So we're all kind of walking in her footprints.
Yes, in her realm. And well, we keep having the evolution. And like I said, mine is an evolution. Sounds like yours is an evolution of what she did.
Hmm.
And,
Yeah.
her sessions were 4 hours long. Mine are 2 hours long. So I found a way to like speed up and not go through every detail of the life. Um,
Hmm.
but I wanted to, in her book, like Three Waves of Volunteers, she's talking about the new earth. And that's a big subject that comes up in my session.
Hmm.
And
Mm.
um, a big thing that people want to know about, and so important. So Ascension and New Earth are, hot spiritual topics. So I thought we'd talk about those.
Oh,
So are you
sure.
having New Earth come up in some of your sessions, or I'm sure, or, what would you
You
say?
know, my sessions are more focused on kind of the current life that the person is having and what the dynamics are that they're working through currently. So it hasn't been. There've been some sessions I've had that have projected into the future, but
Mhm,
those, I think that every regressionist sort of develops a specialty
mhm,
over time, and my specialty has really become contacting the guides. And
mhm,
most of the questions that people have are personal, so I
mhm.
haven't had too many people ask about what's coming. But as far as what's coming for the future, I really have. In the last few years, I've been studying the Book of Revelation, and particularly the way that Edgar Cayce interpreted it. And I think it's all there. We're basically in chapter 18 in the fall of Babylon, which is the fall of the ego. And
Yes.
so we have to go through this fall, and the ego falling has to do a lot with the economic kind of selfishness and greed underpinnings of our society, and we're watching that fall. but it has to fall in order for the New Jerusalem to rise up, which is the soul consciousness. And so I think that we're all very brave souls that we're incarnating during this transition. And what I try to tell, when I talk with people, I try to say, on the level of the soul, we're probably a couple of days, a week most, from soul consciousness on earth. But when I talk about soul days, that's really like generations. So I think we're 3, 5, 7 generations away from that 1,000 years of peace, where we'll have an attempt at soul consciousness on the earth, which really hasn't happened. I think we've had like Egypt at its height, I think, was a very spiritual, conscious sort of place. But I think that's the, I think we're like John the Baptist. We're the forerunners of the age of Christ, the awakened period that's coming. So we're here doing the hard work of, just like you, trying to plant seeds, try to awaken those that want to make the transition from the ending of Pisces into the age of Aquarius. The Piscean values, as they've been epitomized in recent times, are really selfish and greed. And so that's just over. And so we're moving into the age of Aquarius, which is really about the love of humanity. And so whoever wants to come on the lifeboat to get to the new ship is welcome. But some people are clinging to the old. And that's where you're seeing a lot of this angst and crisis and, tension. I think it's interesting we're having this interview, a week before we have our national election. I think that regardless of who wins, that there's going to be a large tumult on either side of that division. And so this is a little bit, I think, the calm before the next big storm that we're going to have coming up.
Yes, definitely things are coming. I've seen in my visions, and Corona was just the beginning of, trying to wake people up, and suffering is a big, root of everyone's awakening. And we're kind of seeing a planetary ego death going on with all around the world, I would say. But so Ascension, definition of Ascension is the rising. And really, we don't know how strong we are until we're faced with, big problems and things that everyone is facing right now economically. People are scared for the future. But, and division and fear is just being fed constantly by the media and the news and politicians even. And so many people are stuck in this fear right now, in this fear frequency, which is holding them back. And fear is a trap. It is so bad for the soul, so bad for the heart. And we can't be connected to God or connected to love when we're stuck in fear. So that is a huge message the angels tell me over and over, and it's 365 times mentioned in the Bible that have no fear. And, that's so every day we have it 365 times. We should not have any fear and trust God protects us and trust the angels are there protecting us. So, but, like I said, there are people that are trusting more, going within more, but coming out of the fear is going to be a big challenge for some people. And I tell people, don't watch the news because it's just making people more paranoid and more, fearful. And then it's not a good thing. It's not a positive thing. I've stayed away from the politics for what the angels told me, take a break from politics, as I needed it. Because I'm like, this is draining. This is so draining. And, so much division, within families are split over all of these politics, brothers not talking to brothers over who they're voting for. And, people just not agreeing to disagree. Of course, that's the ego involved there. But there are definitely things we need to be prepared for spiritually as well. That is the thing, how people need to prepare for these times is aligning themselves, doing their inner healing, coming back to love and coming back to God. And that's what God wants all along. That's but so I had another question. I'll see if there's anything else you want to add to that.
No, this is all a great conversation. It's so necessary. People are writing me and they are being just grateful that people like you and me are giving people spiritual resources to manage these times that on the ego level look really dire. And it's helpful to realize that there's a spiritual message or spiritual opportunities at the same time.
Yes, I actually had asked my angel guides. I said, "What is the cure for Corona?" And I'd asked them twice because the first time they answered, I'm like, I don't know. Are you sure?" And
Yeah.
they said
Hmm.
the cure was love and unity for Corona or COVID. And I was like, "Oh, it's not an herb, or And they're like, "No, it's love and
Hmm.
unity." And I'm like, "Well, of course it is. I shouldn't have asked twice."
Yeah.
Sometimes.
But if love and unity are the cure, we could see how there's been hate and discord, which if that's been the cause, you could see that they would certainly be connected.
Oh, for sure, definitely. And people don't really, we cannot fight hate with hate. And that's another big message Jesus taught, Buddha taught.
Mm.
And
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know if Wayne Dyer said this, but whatever the question, the answer is love. And I love that saying. I don't think he even
Hmm.
originated it, but I know he said it. And
Hmm.
it came from source. Source is
Yeah.
the ultimate,
Yeah.
everything's source
Hmm.
consciousness. But how would you describe the awakening? And I also tell everyone, we're in the times of revelations. I should send you, because you're like the meme king and I love your memes on Facebook. I
Hmm.
have a funny
Hmm.
that says, looking outside today, what chapter of Revelation are we on? And she's like, it's a
Yeah.
meme. I'm sure you'd get a kick out of
When I see those, I always answer it. I always say chapter 18, and then people are surprised
Okay, oh, you've
because
seen
that's where we are.
that. Oh, you've seen
We're in
that.
chapter. If you want to read chapter 18 of Revelation, it's quite clear.
Oh,
That's
yeah.
what we're going through.
Yes.
There's 22 chapters, so there's 4 more to go before we get to the New Jerusalem.
Yes, and it's helpful. And I try to relate that to New Earth. They call it New Earth in channeling sessions. And I'm like, clarifying that,
Hmm.
well, this is New Jerusalem if you need a biblical, reference. And I
Yeah. Yeah.
really,
The New Earth is the same thing. Yeah.
mhm. I really love Edgar Cayce's book and on how he interprets and puts in what was taken out. A lot of books
Hmm.
were removed from the Bible.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
the Gospel of Thomas, that's probably my favorite book. And it was words
Hmm.
directly spoken by Jesus, and that was taken out. And
Hmm.
that is spiritual gold, that book. I don't know if you're a fan
Yeah.
of that. Is an amazing, it talks about the third eye, meditation, and really
Hmm.
is a good book I recommend for Christians to bridge the gap, to start looking, for more information,
Yeah.
and connecting, East with West and
Hmm.
all of that. But awaken, all these people are calling themselves woke now. I don't know if you've noticed this trend. Have you seen that?
Oh, yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
and
Yeah. Oh, yes. Your question was, how would I define awakening?
yeah,
Is that, well, I would think that, when you're moving beyond, when you're making your decisions and your life choices based on ego centered things, which would be fears and doubts and insecurities, or the small part of you is just perceiving threat, and basically you're like in your primitive part of your brain, which is fight, flight, or freeze. I think that's what we're seeing out in the world, like a very fear
hmm,
oriented way of approaching it. And I think woke or awakening is when you're moving more and more to your eternal consciousness. It's like when Jesus said, what do you have to worry about? Look at the birds. God feeds them and they're clothed. And so I think moving to that consciousness of that there's much more to us than just this little physical body, and that we have many more resources. We have all these guides and angels, and we have so many resources that if we'll just turn to them, we can make our life easier. And I think that's like when Jesus said we can make our lives more abundant. I think that woke means that you're just kind of tapping in to that abundance that you have if you'll just transcend ego consciousness and move into soul consciousness. Like a lot of times I'll tell people that we're acting like beggars, but we're actually karmic millionaires. And people don't know to go to the bank and cash that check. You've got $1 million. Why are you begging on the streets? I think we have this amnesia of who we are and where we come from. And I think if we would just go to the bank and cash a check, we'd see how much resources we have.
yes. Well, we create our reality, and people, it's hard for them to understand all our troubles and all these things and what we think we become. Also, as Buddha says, and
Hmm.
Jesus
Hmm.
also, over in the Bible, that, when I try to teach people about manifesting, I said, we're sabotaging our manifesting more than we work on manifesting, because every negative thought we think and say, we're going to create that. So the more negative a person is, the more negative they're going to get back, because that's what they're putting out into the universe. And it's the law of attraction as well. They're attracting more of that negativity. That's why you'll see, you know, I'll call them energy vampires too, because they're constantly dramatic, constantly negative, and it's always woe is me, and they're just perpetuating in that cycle because that's how they think and that's what they believe, that, you know, they have bad luck, or, you know, nothing works out for them. And so it takes really, what my angel guide just said recently, we need a will of titanium just to overcome the ego, but also to overcome our negative thinking patterns. And a lot of it was implanted from our childhood, is a big problem that, you know, especially me, I had that growing up, of a very negative program that I've had to overcome. And that's and it's the world. There's negativity everywhere constantly, you know, programming people, they're not good enough, and making people not love themselves. And how important it is that we love ourselves, because God loves us the way we are. And when we don't love ourselves, it hurts God. It hurts God's heart. And it's just, I explained to, you know, a client, when you don't love yourself, what if your child came to you and said, Mom, I don't love myself. I don't feel good enough. I just don't think I'm worthy. It would break your heart. And that's also how God, you know, feels when his children and all of us say, we're not good enough. We're not worthy. I'm not perfect. And we don't have to be perfect to be loved by God. You know, God, of course, always wants us to keep growing and, you know, always reflect on if we make a mistake, but not beating ourselves up is very counterproductive. And that's a lot that I did a lot of my life in the past before I was more awakened. And empaths like to do that. Like I would, and maybe because I was Catholic, you know, we were always self-condemning, or have that program, you know, like, well, I'm not worthy. But so that's, I think, so important about, like, you know, what I'm teaching people, and God's message is we need to love ourselves, and not in an egoic way.
Sounds very valuable. It sounds like you're helping a lot of people, because people need to hear that, and they need teachers that have been through it, you know, so the teacher has empathy.
Yes. And a lot of I would say unawakened empaths were just have a hard time loving themselves, or they give so much and never set boundaries, and realize sometimes self-love is telling people no, that, you know, I can't give you that right now, that I need, you know, we can't pour from an empty cup. And how exhausting it is being an empath, until you realize you need to protect your energies, protect our aura field from energy vampires out there. And
definitely,
social media is an energy vampire. I don't know if you notice, like, if I'm on there a lot, I'm just like drained, because it's like overwhelming sometimes.
Well, it's
of negativity.
I find that with social media, it's just like it's almost like anything in life. You just have to control it. And so, like, on my pages, I just don't tolerate negativity. You know, I don't even know if it's really a person. It might be a bot, you know? So it's just like, just take people off of my page that are contentious and strife and looking for arguments. And I just try to make my page a safe place for people to come and laugh and learn. And so I've tried to create a boundary around it. And so I think that's what we have to do. It's like, you know, I remember a long time ago, a teacher told me that the internet was going to be both the best of things and the worst of things. And I think the best is that anyone around the world can jump on the internet, and you can have conversations and contact with people in Kenya or people in Nicaragua, where we can connect, we can have a oneness with ourselves, and we can share ways that we couldn't in the old paradigm. But of course, like you're saying, it's also become a place where, you know, there's horrible things that can be done on social media and horrible things that can be done over the internet. But I think it's really forcing us to use our will and to impose kind of spiritual boundaries around how we interact on social media and what we tolerate from other people in that arena. I just delete, like, if people are making negative nonsense comments, I just delete them. If they keep it up, I just delete them off the page. You know, we call it unfriending, but you know, half of these people I've never, you know, 90% of our people I've never met. I can't, you know, they're not really friends. I think they're just, you know, it's like a classroom. And anytime you're in a classroom, there's rules. You can't do certain things in a classroom, or you get sent to the principal's office, or you get kicked out. So I think we have to approach it the same sort of way. I think sometimes we don't use, like you're saying with empaths, we don't understand that boundaries are as important as anything else. I think it's probably the most important thing that an empath has to learn is that establishing and setting strong boundaries. It not only helps you, but it helps other people. Other people don't do it. A child doesn't do well if there's not structure and boundaries. We all need that.
Yes, definitely. But I've
Hmm.
found, just I recommend to clients a lot, like the more time they spend on social media, that's one of the first questions I ask. It causes depression, it causes anxiety, and everybody's comparing their lives to others, constantly on
Yeah.
Facebook. And there's a lot of jealousy going on Facebook because everyone's bragging on there. Everyone's always
Yeah.
bragging, and
Yeah.
it's a popularity contest
But
too.
what I would say is, don't go to those pages. If you find there's a page that you go to, and after you leave it, you always feel less than.
Hmm.
Stop going to that page. There's plenty of pages. There's plenty of Instagram people to follow that they just are nourishing. Like you read them and you're inspired. And so it's like, that's what I call create space. Even your friends, it's like, we don't remember Jesus's scripture. He says, I didn't come with a feather, I come with a sword. And
Hmm.
sometimes you got to cut people out of your lives. And so I think that perhaps more than any other time, because we're a global society, we have to set stronger boundaries, because there's universal energies, both constructive and destructive, that are available to us now, like rarely in our history. So I think that that to survive this intense period of time is getting comfortable with saying no, with blocking, with the blessing for coronavirus for me is that I've just been staying at home a lot more. The last 6 or 8 months I've just been at home, and I realize I love it. I realize how much work it took for me to go out and speak and meet with people and set boundaries and interact with all kinds of energies. But now that I'm home, I feel like it's been like a new lease on life. I'm eating better, exercising more, meditating more. And so it's been a very, very healthy experience for me. I know that's not been like that for everyone or even very many people, but for me personally, it's been a blessing.
Oh yes. I mean, there's so many blessings in disguise with Corona. Like I said, it's been a time people have had more time with their family, and really
Hmm.
we had a vacation. We've been at home, we've had a
Hmm.
vacation for a little while. But
Yeah.
would you relate, going back to awakening and ascension, but I want to talk about woke, that word really, I don't know, kind of annoys me because everyone's using it and they really don't
Yeah.
know what it means. And, I call my when I was making, I have Denali Mind Body Soul on Facebook, and I originally made that because
Hmm.
I just want to raise the vibration of Facebook. So I'll post daily on there, like spiritual wisdom, inspiration, things about self-love. So it's definitely a page where people can go and feel good after they go there, and how important that is that we have, balancing, trying to bring back the light and love on Facebook. And you shouldn't feel depressed after you go to my page, or drained, or
Right. Exactly.
but and of course
Yeah.
I follow all positive, follow you and lots of other enlightened, teachers.
Well,
And
I I have followers that they told me that they're on Facebook just to follow my page. They don't do anything else. They
mhm,
just follow the stuff. And that's great boundaries, because I hope and I try to make my page a funny place, a safe place, a learning place, and I try to, if you don't play nice with others, I kick you out of the playground. And so I try to have that be
mhm,
my space. So I think it's doable. I
it,
think that we, like you're saying, we have to realize we have will, and right now is a time where we really have to use our will. We have to make choices. Like, before us stands good and evil. However dramatic you want to be about it, but if you're not going to make choices, you're going to get in trouble. Like, if you're not going to use your will,
mhm,
I think it's now is very, very important to make choices about not accepting certain energies and accepting others, and discerning what is a good energy and what is a destructive energy.
yes, very
It's
important.
like food.
Mhm,
We wouldn't drink food that was rotted on the floor,
mhm.
but we sometimes let rotten stuff into our minds and into our field of awareness. And I think we have to start becoming a little bit more attentive of what we're consuming,
Yeah,
mentally, physically, and spiritually.
Yes, movies, music, all that, are affecting our subconscious. So
Hmm.
I've been doing cleansing of all those for
Hmm.
years. And um, but what I was going to say about woke is,
Oh,
and the,
good, good. Well, you're ahead of the
yeah,
curve.
oh yeah, just that, it's become political even, where I have Democrats are calling themselves woke, Republicans are calling themselves woke now, or just all kinds of sorts of people are, I'm woke, and they think it's about, conspiracies that, well, they know conspiracies, or everyone has their own definition. And I feel,
Right.
it's good to put out, when I started doing this work and made my page, I was debating, should I call myself an awakened life coach or an enlightened life coach? I went with enlightened, but um, I feel, awakening is a spiritual experience, is what people need to know. And it takes years. It takes, you can't become woke overnight or watch a documentary and then you're woke. And because that's,
Well, the the well, the ego is always insidious. The ego is always, you have to always be on guard. So the ego may trick you into thinking that you're enlightened or that you're woke, and it's really you're just drinking a different flavor of ego Kool-Aid, where
mm-hmm.
it's like just because it's a different flavor, it doesn't mean that it's a different consciousness.
Yeah, very good. I agree with that. And of course,
Hmm.
I'm on my journey of enlightenment. I have ways to go. Obviously, I'm not, I haven't ascended totally like Buddha yet or anything,
Hmm.
um, but
But I think even the term of being woke, it implies that you've finished. It's like I would never call myself awakened, because it's like I don't feel I've completed anything. I feel like I'm in the process of awakening,
yes.
and today, hopefully I'm ahead of where I was a year ago and
Hmm.
ahead of where I was 5 years ago. But I think that awakening, there's so much that, if you want to be enlightened or you're going to be like Buddha, those are multiple layers and stages of that process, like you were saying. But I
Yeah.
think it's just moving into that, you when crises come up and those sorts of things, that you feel that your house is built more in a place of the eternal rather in the place of the ego or the fragile. And so as crises come up, it's almost like your consciousness is as big or larger, so you're not as damaged by
Yes.
stuff that comes up. There was that Indian sage that tried to recapitulate his whole lifetime of teachings, and what he came up with is, he says, well, through the practices that I've tried to teach and what I've done myself, is I've learned to be okay with things turning out
Hmm.
the way that they do, and things turning out differently than I thought they would. So it's like, how do you react if you're going to go out on a picnic? You've planned it for a month, and then the day of the picnic is a hurricane.
Hmm.
Some people would be so angry, so disappointed, versus the awakened view is like, okay, today's a hurricane. I guess we'll have an inner picnic. That you just accept
Yes.
what the situation is and you work with it. And then who knows, maybe if you had gone that day to have the picnic, something bad would have happened. You never know how the hand of spirit is guiding you. So that even that the whole time, when even people are trying to manifest, and this whole thing of the secret and all this stuff, I think we have to be careful that the ego can manifest also. And when we manifest from the level of the ego, it's not necessarily for our own good. Like, I think there's way too much emphasis on manifesting as far as physical, economic wealth, abundance materially. I don't think that's any kind of a blessing. I
No.
mean, it's, if wealth comes as a product of your spiritual intentions and your spiritual work, then that's one thing, but you're probably going to share it if you're really in a spiritual place. But I think that we really ought to check in with the things that we want to manifest and feed them to our spiritual nature, and then manifest from that place, manifest more.
Hmm.
That's why I always think that the highest prayer isn't my will. The highest prayer is thy will. The God's will, or the oneness will. It kind of knows what's best for you. Like, I was having a complicated issue with my older brother, over a family inheritance, and it was just getting down to the wire. But there was this, we were either going to sell the property, or we were going to have a lawsuit, which was probably going to last 2 years. My ego level, I wanted to sell the property and get out of this mess and disconnect from my brother's toxicity. But I realized that maybe on the soul level, it'd be more beneficial for me to keep working for 2 more years with my brother, and so as much as my ego wanted this to be done, I said, thy will be done. I can't see the whole picture.
Mhm.
If my soul will grow more this way, then I accept it. And so that's how I've kind of an example of how I think we can certainly express our ego desires, but be open to the God will, or if you don't use the word God, source will, or that there's a greater purpose, the oneness or whatever. We're here. I always say that your ego had nothing to do with the planning of your life. Your parents, all that stuff, the ego wasn't even born yet. That was your soul level. But once you're born, your ego came into consciousness, and your ego is like, what the heck? Like, who are these people? Who planned this? There can't be a God. My mother, my father is horrible. All this stuff my life is negative. So the ego is really surprised at what the soul has planned. So I always say the soul comes here to work, but your ego wants a pina colada in Barbados. And so we have this conflict
Yes.
between soul consciousness and ego consciousness. It's fine, swing it, but it's not the purpose of your life.
Yes. Well, there's so many life coaches out there, or spiritual coaches, that they're all about manifest wealth and you're going to get rich and let me teach you. And, and I'm
Yes.
quite the opposite of that. Or,
Yeah.
they're out in their luxury cars doing photo shoots. And,
Yes.
I'm more than comfortable, and I don't, tell if they want a life coach like that, or spiritual coach like that, that's not what I'm about. And
Mm-hmm.
neither are you, obviously, and nor do I don't desire to be rich or things like that. Those aren't things that I try to manifest. I want to be comfortable, of course, and I'm more than comfortable, and thank God for all my blessings and what I have manifested. But there is a big problem with, I feel like a lot of fake light workers or fake spiritual coaches that are out there taking advantage of people in promising them, wealth and whatever they want and things like that. Um,
Well, in chapter 18, it's like the fall of Babylon has to do with all the false prophets. And so there's, if you're marketing things spiritually with manifesting on the ego level, that's very seductive, but it's a false prophecy, because if you were to manifest all your ego desires, that would be horrible. That would be the worst thing for you spiritually. We don't realize how much the obstacles, challenges that we face are the richness of a life. It's like we all want to become mature. Everybody loves maturity, but how do you become mature? By overcoming obstacles. If you take all the obstacles away from somebody, they don't mature. Like you see these children of oftentimes very wealthy people, they've been pampered, no obstacles, but they're very, shallow people. It's very important that we have obstacles, that we work through them, that we find resources within ourselves. So I think that's the real manifesting, or the real understanding of life, is that if you really want to get to it, your soul planned this out, not your ego. Your ego will never help you understand your soul purposes. They talk different languages. They're completely different levels of consciousness. And so the ego needs to be infused by soul, so that it's a broader. Let your ego be a tool of your soul expression.
yes, and I think I totally agree with that. I also think with awakening, when the more enlightened you become, the more awakened you come in this process as people, it doesn't mean your life is easier necessarily, or that all your problems go away, because we're still in this 3D matrix and we're going to be tested continually still, but everything is a lesson. So like you were going to that picnic and there was a hurricane, there was a lesson in that, and which is
Yes.
a blessing, even if it may seem negative. A lot of things that seem negative,
Right.
again, are actually blessings in disguise. And
Yes.
when now anything, negative, like if I have a family issue or whatever, I go within and I try to say, well, what is this teaching me? What is my lesson that I need to learn here? Or,
Mm-hmm.
I am a sensitive and still can get my feelings hurt, occasionally by people. And then I'll have to, realize, okay, anyone that hurts my feelings, it's because they're hurting, and that's really, like, hurt people is a saying out there. And I
Yes.
like to let people,
Yeah.
healed people can heal people too. And we don't have to
Yes.
be that hurt person anymore, and realize the more healing you do, and how it's just a vicious cycle. If someone hurts me, I don't need to hurt them back. I don't need to have the last word. I don't need to
Hmm.
retaliate, because that's just creating karma for me. It's their karma if they're going to say
Hmm.
mean things or hurtful things to you or whomever,
Yeah.
and to let that be their
And
karma.
it's okay to, and it doesn't mean you're not spiritual if you're hurt or you're angry or you have a lot of emotional reaction to it. Your spiritual aspect is how you choose to deal with those emotions, but it's very spiritual to allow yourself to feel.
Yes.
It's, again, if you look at Revelation, we have karma stored along our endocrine system, and so the spiritual path is emotional. I think the empaths are teaching the way. It's like we've valued numbness. We value numbing. As you buck up, buttercup, and big boys don't cry. This is all ways that we've numbed ourselves. And if your hand is numb, it's injured. The
Hmm.
healthy hand is sensitive. So these sensitives and empaths that are coming in, I think they're like the new pattern. We're regaining our sense of sensitivity so that we can regain our humanity. Being sensitive means that you care, and so you're less likely to hurt somebody if you have empathy. If you realize, why would I hurt you? It'll hurt me to hurt you. That's the evolution. But it's a hard time to be empathic because so much of the world is numb and is unempathic and is very insensitive. And so we have to feel these kind of interpersonal atrocities that are happening every day right in front of us.
Yes, and it's very hard for me to have inauthentic conversations in a world of, fakeness and falseness everywhere. And it's like that I've had to deal with my whole life. Like, oh, I want, I've been searching for the spiritual
Yeah.
people and the deep conversations and the soul touching conversations, which I
Yeah.
get to have more of now, which I love, and I'm so thankful for that. But
I do.
yeah,
Yeah,
and
I'm like that too.
yeah, it is. And even on Facebook and that, we'll try to have, engage in deep conversation, because it's so surface and superficial on there or wherever I am. But I'll try to engage at any event or whatever. Let's talk about something like real or worthy, or, not talk about Hollywood celebrities or whatever people are talking about. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah,
There's lots of that.
but and I think being a light worker like yourself as well, if you don't call yourself that, I'm going to call you one, because you work the light. Your
Hmm.
soul family, and you're here to help raise the consciousness and definitely helping people, go to the new earth, and
Hmm.
planting so many seeds. And you have trees planted, I'm sure, everywhere from your seeds, of course. But I think, so I'm very hopeful, and I think it's so important also that people don't lose their hope. And that's also a big message that comes from source and from God. and
Hmm.
and also, I've always felt different in this world, and I think that's another sign that people need to realize. If you've always felt like you didn't fit in, and you were different and you were more sensitive, that it's, that's the soul
Hmm.
calling, telling you, yeah, you're an empath, and you don't want to fit in this world, because this world is a fallen world. You really don't want to be a
Hmm.
follower of that world. And when you start becoming a leader and start following, you awaken to your true self, you start following your true path and awakening even more and getting closer to God. The more you follow your soul, the more you follow your intuition and your heart. And that's really,
Hmm.
we are in a society that lives in ego, and what God wants
Hmm.
society to live from the heart. And I do believe this is going to happen, and know, from all the prophecies, and that, yeah, the age of Aquarius, and it's something beautiful and hopeful to look forward to for all of us. And we just have work to do to get there. It doesn't come easy. We got to
Hmm.
work. We can't be spiritually lazy. That's the other thing that I
It's
feel.
true.
A lot of people will buy crystals and sage their house now and do yoga, but I'm like, there's more work than that. Those are just, and we have to put our heart into whatever we do. If the heart isn't
Hmm.
there, the intentions aren't there, which it's the opposite of a lot of what we've been taught. Is intentions aren't really, what is that saying? Good intentions are the road to hell. And I would say that is so not true. Um,
Hmm.
but well, I think I've been talking for an hour, so I don't know if you have any more time, if there's anything else you wanted to say before we go.
No, it's been wonderful to have a conversation with you and touch on these important aspects. And it just sounds to me like you're doing really good work. And so I'm honored to be having this conversation with you. And I wish you blessings, and I'll try to refer people to you. It sounds like you do great things.
Oh, well, thank you so much. It was an honor to me to talk to you. And I know we know each
Sure. Thank you.
to talk. We
Thank you.
know each other from past lives,
Yes,
but so we're reconnecting. We're
that
reconnecting.
sounds good.
But yeah, people definitely should follow you. And you're one of my favorite Facebook pages too. I almost say I would go on Facebook just to see, because you're always funny and have
Hmm.
good things to say. And I love that about you and your energy and part of your personality, obviously.
Thank you.
And laughter is medicine. What a good medicine laughter,
Yes,
and good for the soul.
yes, I agree. Definitely.
Well, thank you so much. So hopefully we'll connect more in the future. And I would recommend you to anyone. You're like the guru of all of this work that I do. I'm a leader that I'm following
Thank you.
you in your work for sure. So thank you for all that you do for the world and the consciousness, and being such a great teacher to inspire me and
Oh,
thousands.
you're very welcome. That's so nice. Thank you.
Well, have a blessed day.
Good. All right. So you too.
All right. Oh,
Bye-bye.
we're cutting out. Okay. Have a blessed day. Thank you so much. Okay. Bye.
Sure. Did you want to chat?
Oh,
Do
yeah.
you want to end or we're